Well, it's finally happened. Joe Biden is out of the election. He's officially stated he will not be pursuing his party's nomination, and instead is endorsing his vice president Kamala Harris. It's been clear since the last debate that Democrat confidence in Joe Biden has been severely declining. And while Biden initially was resisting the idea that he would be stepping down, he finally caved to the pressure, it would seem. While Kamala has been endorsed, she has not been confirmed as the nominee as of the making of this video, but she is the most likely candidate. There are a few other potential contenders, namely Gavin Newsom, Michelle Obama, and a few others. However, no matter how you slice the situation, it does not look good for the Democrats. This is the closest Trump has come in this election cycle to a near certain victory. Not only did his surviving of an assassination attempt bolster his popularity and public appearance, but the Democrats now, with Joe Biden out of the picture, are facing a crisis of confidence as well as a crisis of unity. The situation evokes memories of the 1968 election. I've often said that Joe Biden is something of a New Deal-esque president with much of the policy he puts forward, and there's something poetic about his stepping down being reminiscent of the stepping down of Lyndon Baines Johnson during the '68 election. And we see similar variables in play as well, from an unpopular foreign war to concerns about his health to economic downturn, even having a third-party candidate who was previously a Democrat. We might be due for a recreation of the 1968 election, which of course went in a landslide to candidate Richard Nixon. Trump is in a position again now more than ever to win a landslide election, with the Democratic Party fractured and seeking unity, as well as taking that blow of saying that Joe Biden was in good health and now facing the fact that he simply is not, and most of his party recognizes that he's not in shape to run. This opens the door to a whole new sea of confidence for Donald Trump as president. Joe Biden was in a very unique position during his campaign for presidency the last time around. He was an old establishment figure who held on to a lot of these New Deal policies. He was very pragmatic and very much like Lyndon Baines Johnson. He had been in a situation where, because he was a veteran politician, did have the fealty of a lot of the party, did have the loyalty and cooperation of many other politicians. Kamala Harris does not have that. Kamala Harris isn't so much of a pragmatist. She's even been considered something of a flip-flopper because she can't really juggle policies the same way that Joe Biden could. In a very practical manner, Joe Biden could say, I support this one day and then I support that the other day, and give some general reasoning for why. Kamala Harris, on the other hand, isn't quite in the same position, and when she attempts to pivot from policy to policy, it seems a lot more like she's flip-flopping or faking her positions. Laid bare, Kamala Harris's policies are rooted in a type of light progressivism, not to the same degree as someone like AOC. I could imagine that if she does end up being the nominee, she would try to strike a balance between that and Joe Biden's policies, probably trying to hold to this idea of being an honest successor to Joe Biden's ideas, visions, and policies, but once again, she might not be able to sell those as effectively as he did. There's also among many the impression that Kamala Harris is shielded from many of Biden's mistakes, but generally speaking, most people do still associate her with the administration. She was vice president, second in command. She's not defended from this stuff the same way, say, a secretary of state or just somebody who was sort of tangentially affiliated with Joe Biden might have been. That's one of the strengths many people attribute to Gavin Newsom, saying that, well, you know, he's not affiliated with the Biden administration in any way. Any wrongdoing on Biden's part, you know, Gavin Newsom's this young guy with fresh ideas who's gonna do much better than him. But then with Gavin Newsom, okay, well, all of California is sort of his responsibility, and we all know how California's doing. Michelle Obama as well, you have this situation where it's like, yeah, she was the wife of the former president, and she did work with the administration to a degree, but she doesn't exactly have a track record for executive leadership. It was really a do-or-die situation for Biden, as, you know, as old as he might have been, and for all that he had going on, sticking with Biden would have at least been a show of strength and a show of confidence from the Democrats. And, you know, consistency, it goes a long way. It's part of the reason many people early on were saying, well, Kamala Harris is not a good vice president, and that, of course, isn't going to help with her chances at being a president. But people were saying, Joe Biden, you should find yourself another vice president. You should swap your running mate this time around. The removal of Joe Biden is that issue, but cranked up significantly. As we've said in a previous video, Trump is already looking much better than Biden does. this situation where Biden's removed, some people might say, okay, we've reset the situation, it's no longer Trump v. Biden, things are alright now. Not quite the case, because if you have Kamala, you have the Biden administration essentially running, but you don't have the pragmatism and experience and skill of Biden. You know, criticism of Biden aside, he is a veteran politician, but you know, that's lost. Even if Biden was on the ticket, again, his cognitive faculties aren't there. That's gone. The Democrats don't have that as an option right now. So you have the Biden administration running without the virtues that Biden brought to the table, and the Democrats are somehow expecting that this is going to perform better against Trump. It simply won't. Now, of course, there is still time for the Democrats. The election is in November. They might surprise us. They might do something wild. And I agree, you know, Trump shouldn't be complacent. The Republicans shouldn't be complacent. The election is not won until it is won. However, as things are right now, things look as bad for the Democrats as they've ever been in this election cycle, and as good for Trump as they have ever been. What needs to continue for Trump to win is to maintain the high momentum and just sort of let the Democrats fumble over themselves. Heck, as it is, I believe the Heritage Foundation or some other organization had pointed out that the Democrats might not be able to get Biden off of the ballot in Wisconsin, Nevada, and Georgia, which, if this is the case, it's going to be nearly impossible for the Democrats to win. And I emphasize if this is the case. This is a legal challenge, and the circumstances surrounding this sort of are based on the idea of how independents get on the ballot. Of course, RFK had to get his party and his name on the ballot early on. But insofar as the two major established parties, generally what happens is they get the party on the ballot, and whenever they have their convention and choose their nominee, then the nominee is on the ballot. So under normal circumstances, this shouldn't be an issue. Joe Biden probably shouldn't be on these ballots anyway, and Kamala will be able to get on those ballots if she's the nominee. But this is still something that might be challenged. Again, is a possibility, though it's probably not going to happen. Now, of course, there are some groups that Kamala Harris might be able to appeal to with greater force than Biden. Kamala, of course, is a much more pro-choice candidate. She's most likely going to run on the fact that she is going to be a woman president. So naturally, she is going to try to appeal far more to the woman vote, and there's a good chance that she'll succeed in this. She will grab some more women voters than Biden might have. No doubt Kamala is also going to attempt to appeal to the black vote as well, using her heritage as sort of a leverage point for that. It's not clear if she will actually perform better than Biden on this front, but the possibility does exist. That being said, even if we assume this, Trump's lead is already significant. The chances of Kamala Harris defeating Trump, even with these advantages insofar as the woman vote and the black vote, it's probably not going to be enough. Even if we assume she appeals more strongly to the general minority vote, she is going to be running on a campaign that's much more sympathetic to immigrants and immigrant descendant populations. She's going to be running on a campaign that's a lot more in favor of police reform, social justice reform. She might try to hammer in on these policies, and it would probably be the smart thing to do on her front, so long as it doesn't alienate moderates. There's a complex balance here. Again, no matter how you slice this, in a race between Kamala and Trump, the chances of her winning are still very, very slim. Once again, however, I must bring up the matter of RFK Jr. Now, some people in past videos have expressed that RFK Jr. isn't going to steal votes from Trump, but rather from the Democrats, that RFK Jr. is a Democrat, that he supports many Democrat policies. All the polls are showing that Kennedy takes more from the Democrats than Trump. I see those polls. I understand those polls. However, I disagree with them. I'm looking at Kennedy's policy. I'm looking at the demographics and populations he appeals to. I'm looking at where he is appearing, what talk shows and what media appearances he makes. I'm looking at what he's saying and who this actually will earn the votes of. Let us, for the sake of this argument, just make a little list of 12 platform points of Kamala's, Kennedy's, and Trump's, and see where there's overlap. Kennedy and Trump are very much running on an anti-establishment platform. Trump and Kennedy are talking about draining the swamp. Trump and Kennedy are talking about there being this deep state that needs to be rooted out. They're talking about cracking down on this tie between the elites and the government that are trying to keep out the voice of the people. Kamala Harris and previously Joe Biden, the Democrat platform in general, is very pro-establishment. It's not looking to rock any boats, it's not looking to radically change the system. It talks about the system being good, the system needs to be preserved and protected, because people like Kennedy and Trump are threats to democracy. That desire to maintain the establishment extends to the global world order. They want to maintain the alliance system, they want to maintain the foreign interventions, they want to maintain the power balance. Kennedy and Trump do not want to maintain this. Kennedy and Trump are running on non-interventionist platforms. They're saying end the foreign wars. They're saying untangle the American empire. These are not Democrat positions. These are positions being exclusively touted by Kennedy and Trump. Now, on the matter of abortion and healthcare, finally there's some overlap between the Democrats and Kennedy. Kamala, of course, very strong pro-choice policies and supports a state-sponsored healthcare plan. Ditto for Kennedy on the state-sponsored healthcare. He wants to have some form of state-sponsored healthcare, likely not to the same extent as the Democrat mainstream and not the same as Kamala, but the government should provide something is the general gist that we're getting from Kennedy's platform. Beyond this, however, he does want to tackle big pharma and implement something of a health and fitness policy to crack down on chronic illness. Trump does not have a strongly defined healthcare plan right now, but when it comes to the matter of abortion, of course, he's running on a pro-life platform and generally delegates this to the states to make the decision on where the limits for birth control would lie. On immigration, Kamala Harris and the Democrats are much more sympathetic to immigrants. Of course, her time as border czar was not very encouraging for people who want to maintain a strong, stable border. What Kamala Harris has advocated for in the past is some form of immigration reform, which will likely mean easier pathways to citizenship, easier ways of entry, but all done under a more legal basis. Of course, that's officially. In practice, it might just be a continuation of the open borders mess that we've had for a good long while. Trump, we of course know his policy on immigration: build the wall and secure the border. Who does Kennedy have more in common with when it comes to immigration? It's not the Democrats. Kennedy does not want open borders. Why? Because open borders are detrimental to domestic labor. Immigrants are stealing the jobs of Americans. Kennedy shares Trump's position that there should be a strong and secure border for the sake of keeping out crime and for the sake of maintaining American jobs for American workers. This extends into labor policy, and it's a type of policy that Trump also shares. We'll call it something of a conservative labor policy, making sure that American jobs are secure for Americans. And Kamala Harris does share this to a degree. With her, it's more of a general labor policy where it's not so much, okay, let's preserve American jobs for Americans, but rather, let's make jobs more accessible. Let's make jobs better paying by raising the minimum wage. Let's allow for more unionization and this sort of angle of tackling it. When it comes to political reform, Kamala, Kennedy, and Trump all have differing priorities. Kamala wants to focus on voter reform, making sure that there can be more democratization, people can access mail-in ballots, more people are able to vote, maybe even lowering the voting age. When it comes to Trump, this takes the form of administrative reform, wanting to gut the administrative state, wanting to get rid of all this bloated bureaucracy and these agencies which he sees as being something of a shadow government. On the part of Kennedy, his focus is campaign reform. He wants to make it easier for third-party candidates to enter and win elections. Another avenue in which Kennedy and the Democrats do have some overlap is on the matter of police reform. Unlike Trump, who wants to lift some of the restrictions placed upon police and provide them more funding and strengthen them, Kennedy and Kamala have been of the position that the police need to be reformed before they are able to crack down on crime and be more effective. Kennedy's position is more of a hybridization of these two, where he does want a strong police force to maintain law and order, but he also wants to crack down on abuses of power, corruption, and discrimination. All three candidates have at one point expressed an interest in cracking down on big tech, but when it comes to Kamala Harris, there is an interest in cracking down on big business. Kennedy, of course, wants to crack down on big pharma and big business, and Trump in general has talked about cracking down on the elites and upon crime. On more cultural and social issues, Kamala Harris and the Democrats, of course, want to push forward some social justice reform. Kennedy has something of a balanced position on this, where he recognizes that things like affirmative action are unconstitutional, however would like to push forward some programs that would help minorities build their own businesses and get education through alternative means. Trump, of course, has taken a strong position on cracking down on DEI, CRT, and gender policy. On environmentalism, Kamala has shown herself to be a sympathizer of the Green New Deal, Kennedy has promoted general environmentalism from a more moderate standpoint, and Trump has spoken about pragmatic resource exploitation, which is to say that he's expressed interest in renewable energies, however wants to focus on what is practical right now for the sake of achieving energy independence. On investment, Kamala Harris is not in the same camp as Joe Biden when it comes to infrastructure investment. Rather, her interest would be in public service investment, providing more public services and goods for the public. Trump, however, does want to focus on greater infrastructure investment, especially in the case of building his 10 new freedom cities. Kennedy, on the other hand, opposes needless expenditure and wants to focus on tackling the national debt instead. Taking a broad look at this, it's clear that there's some overlap between Kennedy and both parties. However, on the major issues, on the non-negotiables, Kennedy shares a lot more with Trump than he does with the Democrats. While Kennedy and Trump both share anti-establishment, non-interventionist, and strong border policies which are utterly unpalatable to the vast majority of Democrats, the only real non-negotiable that Kennedy and the Democrats share is a general pro-choice position. Even on this issue, he's not an absolutist like a lot of Democrats can be, and especially not to the same degree that Kamala is. One might argue that Kennedy's support for minority aid programs is a non-negotiable, but it's nowhere near to the same degree of supporting affirmative action or DEI. It's really not something that's going to scare away a lot of moderate Republicans. But for a moderate Democrat, an anti-establishment isolationist who wants to maintain strong border policy might be more intimidating. What I will say about Kennedy is that he can't be dismissed as someone who's only going to take votes from the Democrats. There's a very strong chance he will take a lot of votes from Donald Trump. It's a risk factor that needs to be accounted for, at the very least considered. While Trump does have a significant lead over Kamala Harris, if Kennedy does end up performing as well as some people say he will, reaching close to 10% of the total vote, that might be significant enough to cost Trump the vote in some key states. In fact, Trump would be smart to do what FDR did when he was concerned that Huey Long might enter the presidential race, and that's steal some of Kennedy's policies, steal some of the opposition's policies that are compatible with your own. Kennedy has a policy for promoting fitness and cracking down on chronic illness, adopt that. Kennedy has a policy for cracking down on big pharma and providing some slightly subsidized government healthcare, adopt that. There's no proper Trump healthcare plan right now, so why not draw inspiration from this source right here? Even borrowing some of Kennedy's campaign reform platform would be very useful, not just because it takes finance out from elections and thus cripples the Democrats if Trump truly is running on an anti-establishment platform, but this is also going to appeal to a lot of independents who in the future might say, look, maybe you're my guy for this election, but afterwards, once you're gone, what's stopping the swamp from just popping up again? It was so hard to get a Trump in office with the two-party system. Why not open up campaign policy a little bit more to make it easier for some third-party candidates to actually have a shot at the presidency? If Trump can essentially monopolize the policies that he shares with Kennedy and add even more to them, then all that's left is Kennedy's overlap with the Democrats, and that's going to make sure that he has that full support base there. As I've said before, Trump's chances look better than they ever had, but the game isn't over just yet. But what do you think? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Like the video if you enjoyed it, and subscribe for more. Mr. Z, out.